Welcome to High Growth Matters, an open comp podcast for influential players in the pre-IPO ecosystem. This show shares insider knowledge about building a badass business, and the expert conversation you're about to hear will cover everything you need to know about hiring and retention, fundraising, leadership, diversity, and more. Let's get to it. Hi, everyone. This is Caitlin Allen, the VP of Marketing at OpenComp. I am one of your co-hosts.
And Nancy Connery, your other co-host, co-founder of OpenComp and principal at Connery Consulting.
Thank you so much for being here today as we speak to racial equity advisor Paul Tucker from the Rise Journey, which is an HR and DEI consulting firm. And we are going to discuss the importance of workplace culture at growing organizations, something that I'm sure we all think about, as well as the strategic approaches that can help small HR teams and solo practitioners succeed in a fast-growing environment. Paul has over 15 years of experience in DEIBA work, and at Rise, he helps small HR teams design and implement strategies to build the best teams and develop sustainable and empowering cultures. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
We are really excited to dive in. So maybe we can start with something personal. How did you get into diversity work?
Great question. Seems like I was destined to get into this work, if I'm honest. So I grew up the product of a Black man and a white woman, never married. So I actually never met my father. And my mother passed when I was young. She passed when I was 6. And apart from learning about, after my mother's passing, this other side of my family and my sister, and spending time with her and living with her for a time, my sister on my father's side, I had grown up, and other than that experience, which was about a year, I had grown up largely in a white, conservative, relatively religious household of working class folks. So grew up with my mother's family. After her death, I moved from sort of family to family within the family. So some time with a cousin who was older, some time with my grandmother, spent some time at a children's home. So I had this really rocky childhood, and one that was sort of deeply concerned or sort of focused on questions of belonging and where to find it. So on top of being this biracial kid, I was also grappling with my identity as a gay person, and really gay adolescent, gay youth. Didn't have a lot of support from the family that I was in, and like many folks, went to college, found my people, found folks, and really did that actually through a race relations program at the undergraduate level, where we focused on building community and building genuine relationships across difference, and doing that through dialogue. So we would have and be a part of weekly roundtable discussions about race and class and gender and sexuality and all of these aspects that make up who we are, and afford some of us with privilege and deny access and opportunity to others, and looking at those things both historically, but also in the present day. The present day back, it was a while ago now, since it's been a moment since I've been in college, but that's really how I got oriented to this work. So the personal experience, but also really dialogue and relationships. So yeah.
Fascinating, Paul. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was just so heartfelt, and really, it's amazing to see you turn this into your career and make such an impact. Can you help us understand the difference between DEI and DEIBA?
Yeah, I think for me, the difference between DEI and DEIBA is really intentionality. Right? So are you going to be holistic? Are you going to be systemic or systematic in your approach? to me, when you say DEIBA or DEIBA in short, which diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility, that's what we sort of how we frame it at the RISE journey. It really looks at the intersections of all of those things and the interdependent nature of all of those things, and all of these aspects of who we are. Whereas DEI, maybe it's not as holistic. And I'll actually just give a bit of a hot take on this one too. I think for me, it matters less what you call it and more how you are orienting the work. So DEIBA is a signal and sort of a signifier because it does encompass more. It is thinking about additional things that maybe the DEI alone isn't really stating on face value. But you have various iterations. We know organizations that we've worked with it's just diversity, or it's just inclusion, or it's diversity and inclusion, or it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes there's justice thrown in there. Sometimes, the order of the words is different. I think for me, it matters less about what you call it and more about your intentions. What are you really working toward? And how is that reflected in the work that you're doing, and less of what you call it. At the same time, I do recognize that DEIBA can be a more holistic signifier or signal to folks and lets them know that you're not just thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, but you're also really focused on belonging. You're really focused on accessibility.
I think that point about going beyond simply intention to actual action and outcomes is a really important one. And I'm fascinated to hear, Paul, in your work with HR teams at fast-growing startups, and I believe you work across a variety of industries, so you can give us quite a swath of best practice.
Sure.
What for creating spaces of belonging and acceptance at work, what are those top best practices, and where do they get applied in the employee experience?
Wow. They get applied in a variety of ways. I mean, I think one of the things that is a bit underrated and that we help our clients think about is just processes and practices as it relates to belonging and acceptance, right? So there's a lot of conversation about bringing your authentic self to work or bringing your whole self. And one of the ways you can take action on that as an employer, and that we work with our clients to do, is really, okay, you have difference or different perspectives. Are you giving them a chance to be heard and valued and supported and nurtured in similar ways as maybe ideas and thoughts and perspectives that are more sort of mainstream are also heard? So I think that's one of the ways in which I really see this as a best practice, but also an underutilized practice, right? Really just thinking about processes and ways of approaching things and nurturing the working across difference.
Very positive impact on a lot of organizations, I'm sure, and so meaningful in so many ways. Let's talk, a little bit about the top hiring tactics that support DEIBA.
Yeah, so a lot of times clients come to us and they ask us, we want to diversify our staff. How do we do that? How do we appeal to folks? And there are a number of actions that different organizations of various sizes can take. I think one of the key things that you can do, again, going back to intentionality, is really be intentional about qualifications. Right? Do you need to have a degree? Is that really important? Does that degree need to come from a particular college or university? Or even if you are sourcing from, coding programs or different boot camps or what have you, is it the same ones? Are you looking at a variety or a wider scope or funnel for the sourcing? So I think this is really important to note in terms of being intentional about qualifications, because most of the jobs that exist today weren't named or didn't have a name, rather. 20 years ago, right? No one, I think 20 years ago would be like, oh, a podcast is a thing, right? Or 30 years ago, right? But now it's a thing. Content creation is a thing. But does it really mean that you need, particular qualifications in a traditional sense? I think really, let me say that again. I think really being intentional about qualifications is important. And when you think about qualifications, I think aptitude or people's potential is more important. And some of the research bears this out as well, that potential is really important. What we're doing, because the jobs that exist today didn't exist 30 years ago, and the jobs that will exist 10, 20, 30 years from now may not exist today. Can you assess, can the qualifications be more tailored to what people are able to learn and the speed at which, or the velocity at which individuals, teams, and your organization as a whole can learn? And that would be more appropriate qualification or criteria that you're looking for from candidates.
It's interesting you say that. Learning agility is a topic that my boss and I have been speaking a lot about as something that differentiates our high performers and the others. What are ways, maybe it's diagnostic questions, or maybe it's something from someone's resume that HR leaders and their talent teams can use to really pinpoint somebody that has high learning IQ?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think assessments and doing them in a standardized way, right? Like really thinking about, we don't want to, as we're thinking about new ways to engage in the practice of hiring, we don't want to introduce biases or let our existing biases play out with those modes of hiring. But definitely thinking about assessments, structured interviews or processes that really get at folks' learning ability, and again, the speed at which they can learn.
Sure. So a standardized process, that makes sense.
Yeah, standardized process.
I think too that one of the things that I always ask for that in pursuit of that characteristic to suss it out is a lot of questions around things they've done wrong or learned, because how someone articulates.
Yes.
The answer is really a symptom of how they'll learn on the job. So I think you make a good point.
Yeah. And I think you can ask questions that get to, what did folks learn, right? Like, how reflective are they? I think that's an important question to ask. Like, what did you learn? Or what does reflection look like to you? Do you take time out to do that? And also just engaging in, not for the sense of like a cultural fit per se, but engaging in questioning that's non-work related, to see how curious are folks outside of the workspace, right? Like, do they have interests or hobbies that they're really like learning things from as well? Because this is not just a way of working, it's a way of being that I think is really helpful. And it's more integrative or holistic or part of the whole experience, and not just how we perform or how we show up at work.
And really taking the time to understand the whole story about the potential employee and your potential coworker really goes a long way.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that is undervalued or underpracticed in the hiring context as well is, there's advice out there that says, okay, you have a diversity statement, include that in the job description. That's great. Not going to complain with that or push back against that. But more important than that, and Caitlin, I think this gets to, intentions and then actions, is connect folks, right? If this is, a woman and that's joining an engineering team, like, do you have a woman's ERG that you could connect that candidate with, that could talk about, okay, there's not a lot of women on the engineering team, so this is what our experience is like. So you're providing truth in advertising about not what's just expected on paper in terms of, these are the projects that we're working on, and this is the, coding language we use and all of the things. But also, what does the workplace experience look like for a woman, for a person of color, and providing that connection and that access to, current employees who are living that experience on a day-to-day basis. You'll get some of that from the interview process, but really having a separate standalone opportunity that's more informal in nature, that you can say, okay, give me the real download on what the situation is like, what work is like here, what the culture is like.
Yeah, and absolutely, that will play into retention and setting up your employees for long-term success and loyalty, which really does go a long way, and we're really in very interesting times right now, particularly in the workplace, and there's a lot of hard news to deliver these days around work, particularly in tech. How should employers communicate with employees in a time of crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard not to be cliche in responding, but I feel from just looking at the past 2 years and what has transpired in the US alone, as it relates to racial equity or racial justice or social justice more broadly. There's a lot that has been said and a little bit of which has been done, right? So I think what's most important to me, and I think what resonates with current employees, with prospective employees, is being honest, right? And again, this goes to intentions and actions. Like, what really do we care about? Have integrity. So be honest, have integrity about what it is that we care about, what it is that we are speaking on. And then I think, again, it's not just worth it to make a statement, because at some point you can make a statement about everything. Something happens in the world we live in. There's so much going on that every day you could be making a statement, but that's not particularly helpful, because then it all becomes noise and there's no signal that gets through. So what I think is important for folks to do, and actually what we've been doing more and more with our clients, we've always had a communications piece to the work that we do and the projects that we support them with, but being more intentional and being more focused on developing a framework for internal communications in particular, but also external communications, that says what's important to us as a company, as an organization, what aligns with our values, what aligns with our purpose for being, what's reflective of the various stakeholders that make up who we are, our current employees, our customers, all of that. So to me, if you have a framework, that keeps you honest and keeps you keeps the integrity in your communications, and that's going to resonate more than a million statements that you could make.
I think that's so important, what you just said, in terms of the consistency, the symmetry between values and action, and the importance of honesty. And I think, one of the areas where I see companies, maybe the leaders and the laggards separated, is in manager training, so that the honesty and the consistency is throughout the organization.
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Paul. We wouldn't be talking about business if there weren't a question about measurement. So my next question for you is, how can HR leaders measure the connection between their strategies and tactics related to DEIBA and company performance? Is there anything that you've seen across your customer base there that you can speak to?
Yeah, I think from our customer base, really, a lot of times, particularly the clients that we're working with, they're smaller, or they've been so invested in product market fit, go to market, all of these things, that they haven't had a lot of time to focus on the people side of the equation and the culture that they're creating. And so they also don't have a lot of data or metrics. Some of them don't have an HRIS or a system in which they can keep data about their employees. So I think one of the biggest things that smaller organizations, in particular, fast-growing organizations, can do is just like start setting or collect baseline data, right? And get a sense of where are you now, get that snapshot, and then make some intentional decisions about what you're going to do as an organization. This is what we help our clients do. We do a discovery and analysis project with folks to get a sense of where are things at. So you're going to do some sort of survey. We're going to help you collect data, demographics about your organization, see where things are more broadly from a business perspective as well, and then figure out, okay, what do we want to do as an organization, and what are the actions we're going to take as they relate to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility. And then you have the ability there after to say, okay, this is where we started. We tried these things, and this is where we are, right? So I think doing things from an experimental approach, I think, is most important. And again, I'm not sure that many organizations do that. I think there's a lot of sort of keeping up with the Joneses. And the way I've sort of framed it is, today, we know this from the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and all of these things. Employees want to work for companies that uphold their values, that, again, speak something, but also do something. They walk the talk. So in a lot of ways, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's table stakes, but that doesn't mean it needs to be boilerplate, right? That you should do something that's unique to you. And if you do it well, that, I think, is your sustainable competitive advantage, right? Like, so many organizations, like, bringing people into the organization from a variety of backgrounds is great. And if not done well, you can just get a lot of conflict and chaos. But if done really well, you can make that, and more organizations or research is suggesting that your strategy should be informed by diversity, equity, inclusion, and your ability to do that.
Just a really quick comment. I feel like you accurately just summarized data science. Have your baseline data, have a hypothesis, rapidly test, and measure.
Yep, exactly.
Well done. Exactly. And also, congratulations on, the RISE journey, recently successfully launching a new product called One Person Human Resources. Yeah. Very fascinating. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thank you for celebrating that. We're really excited about the launch of this new offering to clients, particularly clients that are smaller in nature, right? So we've always had, as part of our founding, an ethos that all businesses deserve equitable HR and DEIBA practices. And so we created OPHR to facilitate positive organizational change at a smaller scale for those organizations. So we've been offering consulting, coaching, and niche learning experiences for workplaces of all sizes. One of the amazing things that we do and that we offer is our spoken word poetry events. So really bringing the arts and diversity and inclusion together. As well as, we have a whole bunch of healing and restorative roundtables and over 200 learning and development sessions that are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion that we call Lunch and Learns. But RISE with OPHR, or One Person Human Resources, is a new offering that we're super excited about. It's a subscription self-service built to help guide organizations' missions and objectives into alignment with culturally shifting HR initiatives. So the goal is really to provide affordable, easy access to the tools and playbooks and resources needed to build and support an engaged workplace culture. Because even if you only have a very small HR team, or it's an HR team of 1, and maybe it's an HR team of 0.5 or 0.25 because they're doing a number of other things, they have the support and feel confident that they can provide for their employees a really engaging and enriching workplace culture and experience.
What a timely offering, too, given the uncertainty of the economy and scrutiny on budget. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
One final question, Paul, as we wrap up our time together, and we ask this of everybody because, like this one, often conversations are very content rich. Of all the amazing things that you have told us about today, if our HR listeners acted on one of the things you've said, what would you recommend it be?
So again, this is going to be a little cliche given the name of our organization, but I would say the journey is yours and you want to make the best of it, right? So do something that is going to be unique and authentic to your organization and to your company. That it may not be all of the things. In fact, it won't be all of the things. If you try to do all of the things, it would be too much. But if it's just being intentional about qualifications, if it's just setting baseline data or collecting that and going from there and figuring out how you're creating a hypothesis and figuring out how you're going to move the needle on these issues, whatever it is, make it or tie it specifically to your values, your vision, your mission, your purpose as an organization, and the culture that you're trying to build, the workplace that you want to create. And that's going to be your defining way to address this issue and will give you something that is uniquely yours and uniquely attributable to your organization and your employee experience.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Paul. What wonderful work that you are doing. So congratulations and thank you for educating and sharing this with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Win top talent while strengthening runway with OpenComp. Thousands of the world's fastest growing companies use our compensation intelligence platform because it offers the most competitive benchmarks and insights available. To learn more, visit app.opencomp.com/signup.